Welcome, dear viewer. I hope you are having a wonderful night. Tonight, I'll be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. I hope you are warm and ready. Let's begin. They started innocently enough. Don't forget your keys. Read the first message, scrawled on a sticky note in loopy letters. It had been left on my fridge door. It immediately grabbed my attention because, at the time, I lived alone and had no memory of writing it, and the handwriting didn't match mine or anyone else's. I was slightly perturbed, but wasn't sure how to react. In the end, I just tossed the note and went to work. The second note came a few days later, left on my kitchen counter. The sticky note was pink this time, but still had the same distinctive loopy handwriting. Make sure to pack a lunch today. Again, I was unsettled. Now, any normal person might have reported this to the police, but during that time, I was going through a major depressive spell. I had moved to a new city, away from my friends and family, and had started a new job that I quickly realized I hated, and that didn't pay nearly enough. Home was lonely, and work was soul-crushing. I had trouble enough getting out of bed each morning, let alone filing a report that I'm sure the police would not take seriously. Even more stressed, I crumpled up the note. However, I ended up packing a small lunch for myself. Usually, I didn't bother to put in the effort and just ate cafeteria food. But against my better judgment, I fulfilled the wishes of the note. That day, the cafeteria was closed. The main cafeteria fridge had broken overnight, and many of the frozen lunches inside had gone bad. Management thought it would be better to shut it down for the day. A feeling of unease settled in my stomach after learning the news. It was as if the note had predicted it. The notes continued throughout the following weeks. They would typically show up on random days, no more than 3 times a day. They were all left in obvious places in my apartment, all on sticky notes and in that unfamiliar loopy handwriting. They began to grow more prophetic. Take 80 today. There will be a bad accident on your way home. Janet is going to offer you some cookies at the office. Politely decline. They will give you food poisoning. Marie has been on a diet. Compliment her on her weight loss. She'll end up thinking well of you. Of course, I tested the notes to see if they were accurate. Every time I ignored their advice, whatever it warned against came true. One day, a note said to pack an umbrella, and I purposely didn't. It was forecast to be sunny that day, so any normal person wouldn't think to pack one. But sure enough, I got soaked that evening walking to my car. I was incredibly curious about the notes. There were so many questions I had about them, and those unanswered questions kept festering in my head. I tried writing notes back in return and leaving them out, but I never got a response. I'd speak out loud and ask questions as if, or in case, the note writer could somehow hear me, but this only made me feel foolish. I'd occasionally make a surprise visit home at odd hours, just to see if I could catch the note writer leaving their notes. Of course, I never caught them. I tried installing cameras in my apartment, even making sure all of the cameras were completely hidden. But the next day, I found every single one of the cameras, insides completely torn out, and placed on the kitchen table with a single note next to them, reading, "Never do that again." The notes stopped coming after that, which made me deeply regretful. I had grown accustomed to the notes. I had begun to rely on them. They had significantly improved my way of life over the last few months, both mentally, financially, and socially. I had actually started making friends at the office thanks to their advice, and for the first time in my life, I was even a bit popular. My managers, who before the notes didn't pay much interest in me, now valued my presence and would ask for my opinion on projects. It was no secret that I was on my way to a promotion. Could I still do that without the notes? I also valued the notes as a friend, as weird as that sounds. Or more like a guardian angel. Wherever they were from, they were always protecting me. Without them, the future was suddenly unknown and dangerous. Every time some mild annoyance popped up from that point on, from bad traffic to stressful work situations and even a minor paper cut, I thought about how this all probably could have been avoided if I still had the notes. The next week, a bright green sticky note appeared on my bathroom mirror. Don't forget to call Mom today. It is her birthday. I nearly cried. I decided to sack my investigation and just accept things as they were. Slowly, the fog of my depressive spell began to lift, and I could feel myself returning to how I used to be. My confidence rose, and for the first time in a while, I felt in equilibrium with my life. I went out, cracked jokes, and even managed to clean up my apartment. I also managed to get a girlfriend somehow. Her name was Amanda. I met her at a pub when I was out with my buddies. The best part of all this is that, for some reason, she seemed to actually be into me. She was gorgeous. Way out of my league, really. With long auburn hair that reached down to her back and soft brown eyes. Her laugh was lovely, and the lemon-scented perfume she liked to wear was intoxicating. She was the type of girl you could chat with for hours and never run out of things to talk about. The relationship was still new, so I was trying not to plan our whole future together in my head. But she was so lovable that it was hard not to. At some point, I briefly thought about telling her about the notes. I've always wanted to tell someone about it, but never really had anyone to tell up until now. I decided not to, however, because I was afraid she might think I was crazy. There was no point, so early in the relationship, in making her think I was a loon. Plus, I was afraid the notes might stop again. If whoever was leaving them clearly didn't want me looking into them, how would they react if I shared what was happening with somebody? So, for the moment, I kept it to myself. Amanda had a hobby of cooking and had invited me to her house on Saturday for, in her words, the best fucking spaghetti you'll ever eat. I was pumped since this was the first time I would actually visit her house. I was in a good mood that evening as I was getting ready for the date. I hummed to myself happily, thinking about how lovely this was going to be, and went downstairs to grab my keys. On the kitchen counter was a new hot pink sticky note. I picked it up instinctively. Kill your girlfriend. My brain stopped for a moment. I read it once, twice, and a third time, the words flashing in my brain, but hitting an error every time. I set the note down and gulped, feeling nauseous. Anxiously, I went to my car and started driving. I tried not to think about the note, but the words kept circling in my mind. Kill your girlfriend. The notes have never failed me before, and they were always in my best interest as far as I knew, which was admittedly not much. Maybe they were wrong this time. Maybe it wasn't meant to be taken literally. Kill could be a synonym for breakup, right? My mind kept trying to make up poor excuses the whole way there. By the time I arrived, I was a sweaty mess and not a lick calmer. I pulled down my sun visor to check my face, and a bright green sticky note fluttered out. I went cold. The notes had never appeared outside my house before. Hands shaking, I picked up the note and read it. Kill Amanda. Take the gun from your glove box and shoot her. I looked at my glove box wide-eyed. I did indeed keep a handgun in my glove box for safety purposes. I wanted to puke and believe this wasn't happening. Again, I ignored the note and walked up to Amanda's house, trying to shake the message from my mind. She answered the door almost immediately after I rang the doorbell. Hey, what's up? She said it with a bright smile. But when she saw my face, the smile dropped. You're okay, Gary? What's wrong? She said so out of concern. Nothing. I lied, trying to force a smile. Well, actually, I think I have a bit of a stomach ache. Come in, she said, ushering me in. The inside of her house was cute and homely, and she fretted over me worriedly as she led me over to her kitchen table. She then took my hand and rubbed it comfortingly. If you're not feeling up to spaghetti, we can always have it another time. Don't worry about it. Do you want any antacids or something? I smiled. The way she was so concerned for me over a simple stomachache made me fall in love with her all over again. My heart pounded with both love and guilt. The aroma of cooked spaghetti was also extremely strong, and even though she said it was fine, I knew it would probably be a bummer for her to pack away all that spaghetti after just making it. "I'm fine, sweetie. I probably have a stomach ache because I haven't eaten much today. I was looking forward so much to your spaghetti." Her smile returned again. I always loved how fast she smiled at things. "Well then, Mr. Hungry, let me grab you a bowl." She left for the kitchen. I reclined back and sighed, sticking my hands in my pockets. I felt a crinkle of paper. Shit. I pulled the paper out of my right pocket. "Bash her head in with your chair." I had a hard time controlling my breathing as I stuffed the note back in my right pocket. I also felt paper in my left pocket, and against my mind screaming for me not to. I pulled it out, realizing that it was actually 2 notes crinked together. Shakily, I unwrinkled the first note. "Do not eat the spaghetti. Drugged." "What's that, Gary?" asked Amanda behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I stuffed the notes back in my left pocket. "Oh, just some note from work I forgot was in my pocket, is all." I said it in a weird voice. She frowned and looked like she wanted to say something, but then thought better of it. "Here, babe," she said gently, handing me a bowl of spaghetti. She sat next to me with her own bowl. She rested her head in her hands and looked at me excitedly and expectantly. I stared at her blankly. "Well, take a bite, silly." She said this, gesturing towards my bowl. "I'm so sorry. I really need to use your bathroom." I jumped up and started looking for her bathroom. She jumped up after me, looking confused. "Gary, what's wrong? You've been acting weird." When I found the right door, I went in and locked the door behind me. She kept knocking and knocking. "Gary, Gary, seriously, what's wrong with you? Is the stomach ache that bad? Talk to me. Gary, please." I backed up against the bathroom wall, then sank to the floor. I pulled out 2 notes from my left pocket again, this time reading the second note. My heart sank. She is not Amanda. "Please, just let me in. It's getting cold." The voice was familiar, only older than I remembered. Very close to detail. "Layla, please." Using my old nickname with a nice touch as well. I sat on the floor next to the door, my arms wrapped around my legs. Of course, this had to happen the week my parents left me alone. They hadn't gone on vacation for years. I practically begged them to get away for a while, for their own good. If I called them, they'd come right back. But I don't think that would have helped me anyway. Besides, I wasn't an idiot. I heard the knock, and I would not open that door. When someone comes to your house, they will ring the bell or knock a few times. Most people like to play it safe and simply use the bell. And then you open the door as you normally would. But never, absolutely never, should you open the door when there's only one knock. It was the very first thing we were told when we moved to this neighborhood all those years ago. There are a bunch of rumors of people disappearing or suddenly dying after opening their doors, though they all supposedly happened before we even lived here. I never believed in it, not even when I was little. This town was simply insane. Most people here were a little eccentric and unusual. Well, that's what I believed until I heard my lost sister call for me after the one loud knock on our front door. "Please, go away," I whispered. Even after all those years, I recognized her voice. And when I heard it, I jumped right up, ready to open that door wide. But I knew it wasn't her. I'd looked through the window. There was nobody in front of our door. I don't know how much time had passed before I finally grabbed my phone and called Max, who's not only our neighbor, but one of my closest friends. "She's here," I said. I knew I wasn't making much sense. I didn't know how to word my thoughts. "Who? Where?" he answered. "Ruby." Silence. "Why?" Max started speaking but stopped. "She knocked." That was enough information for him. "You didn't open, did you?" I shook my head, which of course he couldn't see. "I'm coming over now, okay?" I'm not sure how many minutes passed, but Ruby had stopped asking me to open the door. "Hey, Lainey, I don't think the bell is working," I heard Max say. "Maybe they screwed with it." I swallowed. "You could knock." There was silence for a little while, followed by one loud thud. When I didn't open the door, Max started shouting loudly, "Open the fucking door." His voice became louder and louder until it hit a frequency that almost made my eardrums explode. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And finally, the doorbell rang and the voice became silent. Slowly, I got up from the door to look outside. This time, it was really him. The last time I saw her, we had the biggest fight of our lives. We were sitting in the living room with tea that had already turned cold. I don't open up about Ruby often, but hearing her voice today really messed me up, and all because of stupid Jack. I rolled my eyes. Max smiled. "A boy?" I shook my head and laughed. Jack was a stuffed toy in the shape of a pumpkin. I'd never told Max about the fight. In fact, nobody but my parents knew about it. I loved that damn thing. Won it at the Halloween carnival. When Ruby saw it, she begged me to give it to her. She cried for hours because she hadn't won it. And even when my parents said they'd buy her another toy, she wouldn't stop. She wanted mine. Well, she wanted to be just like you. It's sweet. I nodded. Ruby was a year younger than me, but she used to act as if we were twins. She wore my clothes, played the same sports, and always wanted to hang out with me and my friends. When I think about it now, I think it was adorable. Of course, back then I found it insufferable. I sighed. For days, I took Jack everywhere with me, even to the bathroom. It was probably just out of pettiness, but that toy became everything to me. So when I came home from school one afternoon and saw that Ruby had cut it in half, I screamed at her like never before. She only looked at me with big teary eyes. Max put his hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Lainey. Siblings fight. It's normal. I saw you with her though, and you were a damn good big sister." I nodded. Of course, I knew it was just some stupid fight between kids. But if I could turn back time, I'd give her every shitty toy I owned. This happened 5 years ago. Ruby would be 16 now. My parents have tried everything for years to find her. I believe the only reason we still live here is that they never entirely gave up the hope that she'd come back home one day. Maybe now she is. Just in a different way. "Do you think I'm losing my mind, Max?" He raised an eyebrow. "I think you lost that a whole while ago," he joked. "No, I'm serious. I mean, it's not possible that I actually heard her earlier." He shrugged. "I mean, you did hear a knock. I don't think it was actually her, though. Max and I used to make fun of the superstition. When we were younger, before Ruby disappeared, we once played Ding Dong Ditch. After a few houses, Max decided to knock on the door of our neighbor, Mrs. Telsky. Someone saw us, though, and Max got the biggest lecture of his life from his grandpa. Like it was a really big deal. My parents weren't happy either, but Max was grounded for 2 months, during which his grandpa told him all sorts of horror stories from this town. I don't think it was her either, but I do think it was mimicking her or trying to," I said. "For what it's worth, I think it was smart that you didn't open the door. Maybe we're all just a little crazy, but better safe than sorry, right?" Max offered to stay the night, and I immediately said yes. We got the air mattress and watched movies until I started to hear him snoring. The good thing about Max was that I never felt awkward around him. He has regularly stayed over since we were little, especially often after Ruby was gone. Having him here really helped break the silence. My mind became easier, and my body became heavier. Real thoughts started to mix with dreams, and I was beginning to fall asleep. And then there was another knock. It came from the front door downstairs, but I heard it loud and clearly. My heart started racing, just like it did this afternoon. "Max, did you hear that?" I whispered. But he didn't answer. "Lala, it's dark. Please come and get me." Ruby's new voice cried from outside. "Max, please tell me you heard this." I looked over at him, but he didn't move. "Ma, My friend's eyes were wide open, but he didn't speak. He didn't move. I ran over to him and tried to shake him, but his whole body was stiff. Only his eyes moved. "Let me in," the voice from downstairs screamed. I didn't know what to do anymore. Max was clearly awake, but it seemed as if something was holding him back. It was almost like he was having sleep paralysis, but with his eyes open. "They're pulling me away, Lala. Please help me." I don't know what happened then, but I immediately jumped up and ran downstairs. Some kind of instinct kicked in. Maybe it was her. Maybe I could pull her back inside. But if this was really Ruby, was she also the one doing this to Max? My hands touched the cold door handle, moving almost as if I was in a trance. "I have Jack. They fixed him, Layla. We don't need to fight anymore." Those words pierced through my body and woke something up inside of me. I stepped away from the door and walked back upstairs, passing my room, where Max was still lying. But I didn't stop. I walked to the next room. Ruby's old bedroom, everything there looked just the way it did when she was still here. My parents could never change it. Everything was still the same. And Jack was still placed on her bed, where I put it 5 years ago, after I'd sewn it back together. They almost got me,